Hello movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about a new movie called Alice, Darling. This is probably the first movie that I've seen starring Anna Kendrick since that movie that she did with all of the singing. I can't even remember off the top of my head what it's called. I want to say Step Up. I know that's not right because that was the dancey one with, I think, Channing Tatum. But I'm pretty sure you all know exactly what movie I'm talking about. I'm sure I have seen Anna Kendrick and other things since then. I just don't know that I've really remembered them, which sounds terrible. It just is what it is. So Alice, Darling is a film about Anna Kendrick being the main character. She plays the character Alice. She is dating a man named Simon, and then she has two best friends, Tess and Sophie. She lies to her boyfriend in order to go on a girls' trip with her two best friends, and while she is on the girls' trip, it comes to light that her boyfriend Simon is abusive. And I use air quotes with the word abusive, and I will kind of get into why that is and where I feel like this movie kind of falls a little bit short in terms of that aspect of things. Now, a movie that came to mind, or that continuously really came to mind while I was watching this film, is an older movie that I want to say came out in, oh gosh, I don't want to like age Julia Roberts here, but either the late 80s, early 90s, called Sleeping with the Enemy. And I'm not sure if they've done a remake of this one, but I would highly recommend the original with Julia Roberts. And that movie was basically very similar to this one, kind of, in theme at least. Sleeping with the Enemy really kind of revolved around Julia Roberts' character being in an abusive marriage, and she sort of fakes her own death as the only means of getting away from her abusive husband, who eventually finds her. And it's kind of a bit of a thriller because he does come to kind of take her home by force if necessary. And I think that this movie, Alice, Darling, had some slight attempt at doing something similar, but I don't think that it quite pulled it off. I think the first rule of storytelling that Alice, Darling kind of just gets wrong is that there is a rule in like writing stories that you should show, don't tell, right? So you're not telling the audience what's happening, you're showing them through depictions. And I feel like in movies, that is the whole point, right? Because it is a visual story, and therefore you should be showing a lot of the things. In Alice, Darling, they don't even tell you really what's going on. There is a lot of implied. Things are implied that something is amiss. But a lot of it can be misconstrued as other things. And that's why I say that I use abusive in kind of air quotes, because a lot of that is missing towards the earlier parts of this film. To me, a lot of her behavior can also be kind of taken as codependency, neuroticism, self-esteem issues, which, yes, do also happen in abusive relationships. But because the audience in this film is not being shown any of this abuse, you have no idea really what's going on. Like, Anna Kendrick has what I would consider like panic attacks where she breathes really heavy. At one point, she is so panicked about what she's doing, she throws up, like she gets sick. She's pulling, like twisting her hair around her fingers and pulling chunks of her hair out, which in a relationship, this is the part that just kind of, for some reason, I was like, this is not something that would be very believable, is that this is a long-term relationship. This is a relationship that she has been in for more than a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It is a long-term relationship. And if you are pulling out chunks of your hair because you are so stressed out about your relationship, Anna Kendrick doesn't have like particularly thick, hair to start with. She would have so many bald spots happening because it's not like she's pulling out, like the movie shows you that she is literally pulling out like significant clumps of her hair. And to me, that is something that you would notice. Now, there are a couple of elements through this where they kind of imply that he's like trying to separate her from her friends, but they sort of don't really show you that in any capacity. They give you a flashback of a clip of him telling her, like, if you don't think your friends are good for you, then separate yourself from them. But the clip kind of implies that potentially she was bitching about them or talking about them in a way that would warrant that kind of a response from him. Like in abusive relationships, or not in all of them, obviously, but in a lot of abusive relationships, you do see the abuser attempting to separate you from friends, from family, from anyone that isn't going to be clouded by that abuse, and they're going to be thinking clearly. They're going to be pointing out times where maybe he said something he shouldn't have, are you sure this relationship is healthy? So abusers oftentimes try and separate you from people who will point these things out. But that isn't really shown to you. For instance, he has like an art show. Her boyfriend Simon is a painter, and he has an art show. And he tells her specifically to invite her friends. He is kind to her friends when they show up. It's not like there's nothing that would sort of show you that he has an issue with her being around them, that he wants her to not be near them. Like that's not ever shown to you. And then, she lies to him about going on this girls' trip because she knows that he's not going to let her go. And he ends up coming out to where she is because he's read her emails. Now, a lot of this stuff, like through the course of the movie, you kind of see that he is what I would consider more verbally abusive or mentally abusive. He makes comments about what she's eating so that she will eat, more healthy, things like that. He kind of picks out clothes for her or tells her what hairstyles. He's pretty controlling. You don't see very much of that in the film, so much as it's just kind of implied that he does these things, or she tells you that he does these things, but that's never shown to you in the film. And then when he shows up at the cabin, he shows up and brings them groceries. He cooks them dinner. Like, it's creepy, yes, that your boyfriend is driving out to where you are on this girls' trip in order to like bring you back home. He's obviously very controlling of what she can and cannot do. But a lot of what you see until the very end, like the very last 20, 30 minutes of this film, you don't really see any abuse. So it's just, you just kind of see her behaving in a way that is suspicious. And the two best friends that she has in this movie, Tess and Sophie, they show you, right, that she has been friends with them since she was a child, like a young kid. They have been hanging out and have been best friends for a very long time at this point, like decades. But she has not said a word to them, not a word to them about her relationship, about any of the things that he says to her. They don't learn it until they're going on this trip. Now, I don't want to imply that all women are like this, but women talk to their friends. We are very known for the fact that we like to talk, that we share our feelings, that we share what's going on. I think it's kind of more of an issue that men don't do this. And I think that that's probably why you have situations where a lot of people think that abuse like this can only happen to women. And I think that's where like the case with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard was such an important one, to show that women can also be abusers. But women like to talk, women like to share. And so I don't know that it really did them any favors in this movie to kind of show you that she's not talking to her friends at all about her relationship or about any of the things that could potentially be wrong with it. Now, you know, I've definitely been in some relationships that aren't great, and I have definitely said some things about men that I have dated in the past where my friends were like, "Ooh, gosh, that doesn't seem healthy. Like, that seems toxic. That doesn't seem like a way that he should treat you." And I've definitely gotten into fights with friends because I was on, you know, my boyfriend's side or the guy that I was dating side more so than my friend. Like, you're being pushy, you're reading it wrong, you don't know because you're not in this situation, which a lot of the times can be true. But I don't know, like the fact that she wouldn't say a word to anyone around her seems a little bit not realistic, or, you know, as a friend, I would consider that extremely suspicious. If your girlfriend is only telling you, you know, great, amazing, wonderful things about the boyfriend, I would consider that suspicious. Not that every man, you know, has to have a flaw or has to have something wrong with them, but everyone kind of does. You know, no one gets along 100% of the time. No relationship is perfect 100% of the time. So it just struck me as odd that her friends would have no opinions, not question, you know, the fact that they're only hearing great, amazing things about Simon. I don't know. There's just so much of this that kind of missed the mark, though I do understand what the point was, right? Like it is meant to show that you kind of should potentially reach out to your friends to help you going through situations like this, right? Rely on the people around you to help you with situations where there might be some toxicity or abuse. But I feel like this movie just kind of didn't quite show the audience enough of what was going on to justify her, what I would consider maybe not extreme. I don't know if extreme is the right word, but she definitely has some extreme behaviors. I'm not sure of what other word to use there, that don't make sense when you are missing the context of an abusive relationship, which you don't see really until the end. And then, you know, none of this abuse is physical, which not all abuse needs to be. But even towards the end of the movie, you know, I don't know, like when he gets the angriest is when one of her friends has smashed in the back window of his car as they're trying to leave. Yeah, I'd be mad too as a dude if someone smashed in the back window of my car with a mace or a maul or some kind of an axe, whatever the thing is called in this film. I don't know. And then there's this whole element throughout the movie of a girl who is missing, and it's brought up kind of continuously through the movie over and over and over again that there is this woman who is missing where they are at this vacation, but there's never any real like explanation of what the missing girl is meant to represent, if she represents anything, why the missing girl is even brought up in the first place, like why she's an element to this story. It's just, I don't know if it's meant to be like she's missing and it's supposed to be like perhaps a metaphor of Alice's character kind of missing because she's in the relationship, like her self is missing and then she finds herself at the end. I don't know. I'm reaching there because it never explains what that element of this story is about. So the whole thing for me is just like kind of, it misses a little bit on multiple levels that make it not quite as good as it could have been. I think potentially it could have done them some good to watch some reference movies that have been done of similar situations, like the one I brought up earlier, Sleeping with the Enemy. I think that one's a great, great movie, touching on abuse and abusive relationships and what those can look like. But, pushed obviously to an extreme level because he is physically abusive, as well as mentally abusive. But yeah, this one, I don't know. I hate to say that this movie is not a win for me because I hate saying something like that about a movie that touches on something that I think is a serious topic and something that we should see more elements of in film. But this one was just not particularly a win for me in the way that it was done or the way that the story was told. So those are my thoughts on Alice Darling. I would love to know yours if you have seen this movie. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.